Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Kudalakis, and I'm Senior Marketing Manager here at Progress. Welcome to our What Can You Do with a Data Direct Trial webinar. But before we jump in, I wanted to quickly introduce today's speakers, Todd Wright and Aaron Berg. Todd leads global product marketing for Progress Data Direct. He works closely with the product management and sales organizations to create and promote materials that are relevant and valuable to Progress customers. He is instrumental in developing customer relationships and creating strategic marketing plans that drive awareness, consideration, education, and demand for Progress. Aaron Berg has been a senior solutions engineer with Progress for 5 years. He has worked in the IT space for over 20, working in network administration and data connectivity. His primary focus today is on bridging the gap between data and analytics by using open standards such as ODBC, JDBC, and OData and REST. This broad experience has allowed him to be a valuable resource for customers looking to implement Progress Data Direct connectivity solutions. I'm really excited to have both Todd and Aaron with us today, and now I'll turn it over to them to start the presentation.
Well, thank you, Susan, and hello to everyone on the webcast today. We're going to mix everything up today from our normal way that we would do a webcast. As Susan mentioned, we are going to do a presentation today in regard to how you, as a prospect of Data Direct or a customer of Data Direct, can successfully use our evaluations that we provide to people that are looking at Data Direct. Aaron Berg is on the line. He's going to be the person that's going through the demonstration of the evaluation. And I'm going to play the part of the person that has never done a eval of our software before. Truth be told, as a marketing guy, I've actually never gone through the actual eval process. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions, hopefully questions that you may have as a person interested in our offering. And we look forward to your questions after this. But with all that said, Aaron, why don't you take it away, and I'll interject with any questions I might have about the evaluation process.
All right. Well, thanks, Todd. And I'm a little bit hurt that you've never tried our software before. That
Unsuccessfully as a marketing person tried our software. That's why we have you.
All right. Well, I'll kind of give you a quick overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to do a very brief overview of some hybrid data pipeline use cases, just for those who aren't familiar with it. I know we've covered this in other webinars. And then I'm going to do kind of an install, basically, of how you would deploy hybrid data pipelines trial using Docker. You can use Docker, which I like to do for a hybrid data pipeline. It's a quick way to get it deployed. You also can do a standard bin file installation on Linux. Both those are covered in our documentation. For the trial, we're going to do a single server installation. We could also, in a more of a production environment, support a multi-node deployment for high availability. So all of that can be done either through the Docker installation or through the bin file Linux installation. And once we get it up and running, we will take a look at how you can connect to Salesforce and see that data in Tableau by using hybrid data pipeline to OData enable that, OData being a standards-based REST API. And then we're also going to go the opposite direction and use our on-premises capabilities in hybrid data pipeline to access a on-prem SQL server and bring that data to where you can see it in Salesforce as a single source of truth, but you don't need to actually move the data there. And that's also using OData. So we're going to kind of go in two different directions, but with Salesforce today.
So Aaron, I know that we're going to be doing evaluation of hybrid data pipeline. Just for the sake of anyone that's interested in Data Direct that's listening to this webcast, evaluations for all of our connectors. Is that correct? I know we have evaluations for the Autonomous REST connectors, hybrid data pipeline, and that includes all of our drivers as well, right?
That's correct. Any of our drivers can be downloaded right from our website as a trial, and we have getting started guides for all of those.
Okay, great.
So in terms of hybrid data pipeline specifically, I like to call it a lightweight data gateway. And these are a few different use cases we see. It's often kind of a Swiss Army knife model. It does a lot of different things depending on what your use case is. If you have data in a SaaS application, maybe you're a cloud analytics company and you want to provide your customers with a way to access data for their own needs. Maybe you've done some processing on that data and you want to share that with them. This is a very secure way to give them SQL access to that over ODBC or JDBC, or to OData enable that data and put a REST API on top of it. So we call that an external data gateway. And that way you're not opening ports up directly to a database. You're not having to give people credentials to that database. And with OData, you can even limit the tables and columns that they have access to. plus all the enhanced logging and security that goes around that. Our internal data hub is more the idea of you have citizen BI people inside of your company that want access to a wide range of data sources, whether it be relational sources, REST-based sources, cloud sources. You might have everything from a SQL Server to Salesforce to Dynamics. And with Hybrid Data Pipeline, you can give them a single ODBC or JDBC driver and a single set of credentials to access any of those, all those being configured inside of Hybrid Data Pipeline. Again, with that ability to have this additional security in there, you could use OIDC for the OData access if you want to put that additional layer of authentication. So lots of different controls that you can put in place there. And then the other use case I like to point out is our cloud to ground, and this is one of the ones we'll be demoing at the end, where we're using our on-prem agent, which is a lot like a OneDrive or Dropbox client that installs behind the firewall. And now without a VPN, you have access to the different data sources behind the firewall from the cloud or from wherever you choose to install Hybrid Data Pipeline. The common use case of this, again, is if you're doing maybe like a cloud BI solution and you need access to your customers' data, you don't want to deal with IT to set up a VPN. You also want maybe some additional security around that. So it's a very easy way to get that installed and configured.
So Aaron, the first thing that pops into my mind, I see the underline there, it says without a VPN. What kind of concerns should the people on this webcast or any of our people looking into Data Direct about security and not being on a VPN when they're evaluating that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the nice thing with the on-premises connector is it uses outbound SSL to reach back out to the Hybrid Data Pipeline instance that's been installed in the cloud or on wherever you've chosen to install it. And it doesn't allow access to other things on the network. So where a VPN is traditionally more of a network connection, where you might be able not only to connect to different data sources, you might be able to move files and other things through that. With the on-premises connector, it is proprietary, and it is just giving access to the data sources that are configured through Hybrid Data Pipeline. So it's easier to configure, and you don't have any of the additional security concerns of really connecting your network with another network that a VPN can bring.
All right, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to give you kind of that overall picture of Hybrid Data Pipeline, in the middle here, you'll see your Hybrid Data Pipeline cluster. This is a bit more of a production environment where you have 2 nodes of Hybrid Data Pipeline for high availability sitting behind a load balancer. And like I said, those can reach directly to a wide range of data sources and even including third-party JDBC sources. They can reach out to the cloud. And then you can have that on-prem connector at a remote location that we just talked about. And then all of this can be accessed on the front end of those servers through HTTPS using OData, which is the REST API, as well as ODBC or JDBC. All that runs over HTTPS and either through a load balancer. In this demo, we're actually going to just terminate SSL directly on the HTTP servers. So let's take a quick look at what installing the Docker trial requires. And instead of taking you through the painful process of seeing me work at the command line, which Todd said on our initial trial run was a bit like watching paint dry, I did this through some screen captures here, and then we'll take you through some of the finished results. So what I've already done is open some ports up to our Hybrid Data Pipeline server so we can access it. I'm doing this up in AWS, so I installed Docker on an EC2 instance, and I've opened the ports up for HTTPS, which we're using 8443, as well as some ports for the on-premises connector to be able to reach to the Hybrid Data Pipeline server, and then of course SSH so we could access it. Once I have the ports open, we need a few things to be kind of in hand before we start this. In this case, I've chosen to use a public SSL certificate with this trial. I'm doing that for a few reasons. The main one being that Salesforce Connect, which is a way to connect to OData endpoints in Salesforce, requires a publicly trusted SSL certificate. Now, this is a pretty common use case for this product is using Salesforce Connect. If you use our default built-in certificate, Salesforce won't connect to it. So I thought it'd be valuable to mention this and kind of step through that process. We require you to build a PEM file, which basically consists of all the base64 encoded certificates or your full SSL chain. And that chain needs to consist of everything from the private key all the way down to the root certificate. So you'll usually see somewhere around 4 or 5 base64 encoded certificates inside of the PEM file. Once you build that file out, then we'll save it on the server there, and I'll show you where that goes as we move forward. Once we have that, we're going to go out to our Docker machine. We're going to create a few directories. We're going to create a directory where we're going to download the Hybrid Data Pipeline trial, the Docker image called HDP files. And we're going to create another directory where Hybrid Data Pipeline and the Docker image is going to store their working files as it's running to make sure that we have them in a place that doesn't go away if we decide to delete the Docker container and then start it back up again. So here you'll see I've created the HTTP files and HTTP shared, and then I've copied that PEM file that we created over to the shared directory so that the Hybrid Data Pipeline Docker container will be able to access that. Next, we're going to download Hybrid Data Pipeline. So we're going to go out to our website where you put in your information to get to the trial. And what I like to do here is actually use wget right on the Linux machine where I'm installing to copy it down. So I'm going to actually get the address of the download right from that web page. And as you see on the right, I have a wget, I put in that address, and it's going to download it right to that machine. You could also, SFTP it up to the machine, however you choose to get it there. And then we'll unzip it. So I just do a tar command to extract that gzip file. And once we do that, we're going to have everything extracted right in that HTTP files directory. So we'll make sure we move into that HTTP files and the Docker deploy directory. And from there, we're going to load that right into our Docker repository. So I'm going to do a docker load -i, and it will pull that image right into the repository so that we can then start it. So this is kind of the part that gets into the weeds a little bit with Docker, is you have to build a Docker run statement. And there's a lot of different parameters that go into that get passed in when you start the Docker container to let Hybrid Data Pipeline know how it should be configured. So in this case, I've go through and I'm going to highlight a few of them. You have to have a unique name for your container. I always forget to change this and it gives me an error. So one caveat I like to point out, the ports that you're going to require. So this is mapping the ports in the Docker container to the Docker host so that those initial ports we set up in AWS can reach it. So in this case, I have my HTTPS ports and the 2 ports for the on-premises connector. I also am taking advantage of a new feature we added where we can store the configuration database for the trial outside of the container in the shared directory. By doing this, again, it makes it easy if we want to spin up another container or delete this one, we don't lose that database. You can leave this out and we will store it directly inside of the container. We also need to have our host name here. This is the host name that we will be using publicly to get to the Hybrid Data Pipeline instance we're deploying. And in this case, it does need to match the SSL certificate that we provided in the PEM file. And also is a good time to remind people not to forget to configure any DNS entries that are required so that you can reach this. Set the passwords for our default D2C admin and D2C user accounts. These can be changed once it's up and running. We're going to put in the name of the PEM file that we have in that shared directory. And then finally, we're going to map our HTTP shared directory to the shared directory inside that we created on our local machine running Docker so that they're connected together. And then we run it. So we're going to do the Docker run. We'll run that, and you'll see on the bottom there when you issue a Docker PS, you'll see the Docker image running. It takes about a minute or so to get going, and there you have a trial of Hybrid Data Pipeline.
So Aaron, thank you for all that. It's very detailed. But what if I were to have a question, or if I get stuck, or I just can't figure out what you just did? What does DataDirect have in place to help someone like myself, or anyone listening to this webcast, really get through all the steps if they get stuck?
Sure. So we offer a lot of pre-sales assistance. There's a full set of documentation on all of this, as well as tutorials. And then you also have access to our sales team here. So folks like myself and my colleagues are always happy to answer questions or even hop on to assist. It should be a pretty straightforward process, but we're always here to help.
Makes sense. Thanks.
If you haven't seen Hybrid Data Pipeline before, let me switch over here to where let's go ahead and log in. This will be logging in to the container we actually just created. And inside of here, this is the Hybrid Data Pipeline user interface. So you see it has lots of different things you can do. It supports multi-tenancy. You have users, those users have their associated roles. In this case, this is a brand new system. So we just have my single D2C admin user that I'm logged in as well as my D2C user. And then we have our ability to create data sources. So this is where you would connect to data sources that you want to make available through Hybrid Data Pipeline. So you'll see the wide range here, all the relational sources you would expect, Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, Postgres, MySQL. You'll also see cloud sources, so maybe like BigQuery and Salesforce and even Dynamics. And then we do have our autonomous REST connector built in, which allows you to connect to REST APIs and gives you SQL access to those. Or you can always drop in your own third-party JDBC drivers. So quite a few options here to access data.
So Aaron, even for the evaluation, our customers would be able to, through a Hybrid Data Pipeline, evaluate any of these data sources. Is that correct?
Correct. They are all available right out of the box.
Okay, great.
So let's hop back over here for a sec and take a look at what we're going to show. So this is our trial that's running, and I'm going to show you how we can OData enable Salesforce and then connect to that in Tableau. So what I've done, and we'll kind of step through inside of the Hybrid Data Pipeline interface, is making that connection from Hybrid Data Pipeline to Salesforce, and then OData enabling it inside of Salesforce, and then we'll bring that OData URL into Tableau and take a look at it. I do want to point out that while we're specifically speaking about OData today in this webinar, we do have ODBC and JDBC hybrid drivers, which can also be used for tools that use OData, or if you have a reason to want to use SQL as opposed to OData. So inside of Hybrid Data Pipeline, I've kind of pre-configured some of this to make it a little bit easier. You'll see that we have created a connection to Salesforce with my credentials, the security token. A lot of instances the Salesforce do require that. We'll do a test connection here, and it's going to go out and see what fields are inside of Salesforce. And basically, we build a schema mapping to map it to a relational environment. So see, we successfully connected. Now we're going to OData enable that. So when we go to the OData tab and we click on Edit and View, we actually will bring up this tool that will let us map our fields that we found inside of Salesforce to the OData schema. In this case, I've chosen S-Force as my schema. You'll see the tables I've chosen. So for instance, like account, I think we have, there's a lead table and a few others that I've added into this as well. Scroll down here, lots of tables in Salesforce. So if we go up a little bit, where'd it go? There we go. The lead table, you'll see some different ones that we've chosen. We can adjust the naming on these if needed, both setting different singular and plural namings for the tables. We can also even set aliases on the columns if you want to change how those look as well. Once this is in place, we come back over and we get this OData URI. So we take this, and if we drop this into, say, our browser, this is what the OData endpoint looks like. Now it's already logged in since I had already put my credentials in, but we'd normally authenticate directly to the Hybrid Data Pipeline here. And just so you can kind of get a sense of what OData looks like, when we put in, say, like a specific table, you'll see it bring back the JSON for that. So OData is very easy to use, and we can quickly take the URL and actually paste it into Tableau. So if I come over to Tableau and we take a look at our data source here, you'll see I've taken the OData endpoint, put in my credentials to Hybrid Data Pipeline, and really it looks just like any other relational source, even though we're connecting using the OData REST API. So like I have my accounts or leads or whatnot all in here. And with that, I can very easily then come over and build a visualization. So whether we for whatever data that you want to visualize. So it's really that simple, and you could do this for any of the data sources in Hybrid Data Pipeline. Works really well with that data hub concept. Or again, if you want to expose data that you may have in your cloud environment to customers and have them do their own analytics on it.
So Aaron, as a recap, essentially what you just did was you were able to connect to Salesforce. You were able to also choose the type of data that you want to pull from Salesforce through Hybrid Data Pipeline and put it right into Tableau. Pretty much correct in my summary there? Okay, great.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And I think that, the key thing there is we were doing it without having to install any drivers for Tableau to connect with. It was all going across that REST endpoint. The other demo I wanted to show was how to reach on-premises data. So if you have, say, an on-prem SQL server and you want to use that on-premises connector, which is like that OneDrive or Dropbox client that could sit behind the firewall, that will connect to Hybrid Data Pipeline and allow you to get access to the on-prem SQL server. And then we're going to go the other direction and use Salesforce Connect to visualize that data in Salesforce without actually having to move it to Salesforce. So you have a single source of truth in your SQL server, and you're not going to have to increase your storage costs on the Salesforce side. So to start with installing the on-premises connector, you're going to go back out to where you downloaded the trial, and you'll see a tab for on-premises connector. We're going to download that. And then the other thing we need are 4 files that are created during the Hybrid Data Pipeline installation. We call those our redist files. They include a SSL certificates, a key store, and some configuration details to make it easy to do the deployment of this. The on-premises connector is a Windows application. You install it on a Windows machine of your choice. It just needs to have network access to the data. So you'll see on the right here, I used a tool like FileZilla or any sort of SFTP tool to reach out to my shared directory and then the redist folder where we installed Hybrid Data Pipeline. We'll run the installer. You just have to have those redist files in the same folder as the installer. It's going to ask you to authenticate to the Hybrid Data Pipeline using your D2C admin credentials or whichever user you want to be able to use this tool. You can also share the on-premises connector that you've installed with other users through the management APIs in Hybrid Data Pipeline, as well as even share data sources with other users. So a lot of flexibility there. Once that's installed, we're going to hop back out here and we'll actually take a look and see what the on-premises connector looks like. So here I have it installed, and we can actually just go to the status tab and validate connectivity. Now on this machine that we're logged into, I have a SQL server installed, and you can see here we can return some data from a database. So if we go back out to Hybrid Data Pipeline now, we're going to actually connect to that. So let's go into our data sources here and SQL, and here you're going to see that we are connecting to the database directly. So we're using localhost from the perspective of the on-premises connector, and the name of the database, the port that we're going to connect to it on, as well as our credentials. And then down below here, you'll see connector ID. This is where we're choosing the name of the on-premises connector that we installed. So it makes it very easy to configure. Once that is in place, the test connect is going to validate that we can reach the on-premises connector and then reach the underlying database. And then we're going to do the same thing with OData. So we're going to go in and OData enable the SQL server this time. So you'll see here, I'm reaching my schema, I'm adding my invoice table, and we're going to OData enable all of that. We're going to then take that URI and we're going to go to Salesforce with it. So when we go into Salesforce, we're going to go into the settings in Salesforce to configure access to external data. So we'll go to Setup, and we'll go to External Data. And here you'll see that we have a configuration for OData setup that's going to point directly to that URI that we had out of Hybrid Data Pipeline. I've made it writable. This is a full CRUD solution, so you can actually do updates in Salesforce and they'll be reflected immediately back in your database. We'll put in our credentials to Hybrid Data Pipeline. And once all this is done, we're going to be able to actually see this right inside of Salesforce. So we can actually go into our tabs. I like to create a tab to do this. So let's come back over here, and you'll see that we've created a tab for invoices, which is basically just a way to visualize this inside of Salesforce. So with that, we can go back out to, say, like service inside of Salesforce, go to invoices, we have that tab, and we'll change our view here to see all. And it's going to make a call directly to that OData endpoint. So you'll see all that data coming back directly, but it's actually coming back from this URL that is the Hybrid Data Pipeline. And like I said, there's a full CRUD solution, so I can come in here and change this from $2 to $3 and save. And then we can actually go back over to our database and rerun the query here, and you'll see we changed to $3. So very nice way to get access to data using the external objects capabilities in Salesforce.
So, Aaron, another recap on this one, and correct me if I'm wrong. What we did here, or what you did here, was take an on-premise data source and through Hybrid Data Pipeline, put it within Salesforce. Is that correct?
Yeah, made it so you could see it in Salesforce. I always like to say, because we're not actually moving the data. We're still connecting to it in the SQL Server. We're just giving you the ability to visualize it and work with it in Salesforce.
It makes sense. And from there, are you able to move it into a Power BI or Tableau for the data that you pulled from on-premise?
You would probably just use that OData endpoint that we created, and you could use that with any tool that supported OData. So you could use, your Power BI or Tableau or even Excel, if you even use it with that data hub concept using our hybrid drivers. So you could use the same ODBC or JDBC driver for Hybrid Data Pipeline to connect to SQL Server as well as Salesforce.
Right, makes sense. Thanks.
So I think that is all I had in terms of the demo point of view here, Todd.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for all that. One question that I had after seeing it is I know a lot of organizations are interested in Hybrid Data Pipeline for what is considered the administrative type of capabilities, essentially meaning someone like myself could have central control of all the data sources that Hybrid Data Pipeline can connect to, and also be able to have authentication and encryption type of capabilities, meaning there could be some people within the organization that shouldn't have access to these data sources, and conversely other people can have access. Can you speak a little bit about that, the administrative and the ease of managing all the different data sources within an organization through Hybrid Data Pipeline?
Sure. Yeah, with that data hub idea, you can very easily, as an administrator, connect to a wide range of data sources and then use the share functionality to share those data sources with other Hybrid Data Pipeline users. And then based on their roles, you can even control down to the API level what they have access to. So you could limit them to OData or ODBC or JDBC. And if you're using OData, you could actually even limit, that they can only see what has been configured in OData for them to access. The nice thing also as well is you don't need to give them credentials to the database, so they don't have to log in directly. And if it's a data source that requires OAuth, we actually now have the ability for the admin to create a profile, so they don't even have to have some of the more private parts of the OAuth flow. They can just create their own connection based on what's been pre-configured by the administrator. So those are all very useful from a security point of view. And then on top of that, we also have the ability to log all of the SQL that is issued into the configuration database. And then we have very granular logging of everything going on with the data sources. And then everything in transit is encrypted, as well as anything that we do have as at rest is also encrypted.
Okay, great. Another question that we also get from a lot of organizations is I have Informatica, or we have as an organization, Informatica license is our standard for data integration or data quality, master data management. How does Progress Data Direct fit into what I currently have as a data management solution? And what's the puzzle piece here, and why should I still be interested in Data Direct if I already have data management capabilities?
It's the nice thing with Hybrid Data Pipeline is we're trying to solve some of the connectivity challenges that you may run into with some of those products. So if you have data, again, that's behind a firewall that's hard to get to, or maybe data sources that aren't supported in those products, it can be a nice tool, whether it be Hybrid Data Pipeline, or even to speak of another product, our Autonomous REST connector can be a great solution in those situations, whether it be in Hybrid Data Pipeline or as a standalone offering to connect to a wide range of REST sources that often are missing from a lot of tools, or even custom REST sources that you may have developed on premise or in your own environment.
Okay, great. Another thing as well is, we talked a lot about business intelligence, the Tableaus, the Power BIs of the world. What about analytics providers such as the SaaSes or even open source like Python and R? Hybrid Data Pipeline have good, lack of a better word, partnerships or connections and capabilities within analytics programs?
I mean, I think it's very similar in terms of that ability to have one place to connect to the wide range of data sources would be your probably the best use case there.
That makes sense, and really be able to flow it all in and manage it all within your analytics program. Well, Aaron, that's all the questions I had. I think at this point, it would probably be a good idea with the time that we have remaining to open up the webcast to some of the questions that we may have from our audience. I'm sure there'll be way better questions than I gave you. Let's turn on our cameras. Let's go through some questions and let's see what we have.
All right, that sounds like a great plan.
All right.
All right, guys, I'm gonna rapid fire some questions for you. So we have a couple that came in while you guys were doing the presentations. And the first question is, can Hybrid Data Pipeline be managed by REST APIs?
Sure, it most definitely can. Everything that we expose in the UI can be configured through the REST management endpoints. And actually, we even have features beyond that that can be used, and they're all documented as well.
Great. So there actually are two questions about Salesforce. So I'll ask them one at a time. How can you connect to a Salesforce specific case record type from Power BI?
So with Hybrid Data Pipeline, or even with our standalone Salesforce drivers, we'll present the cases table or object inside of Salesforce as a table. And there's a number of different tables that we actually present related to cases. And so you'd be able to query that with just like a normal SQL query through Power BI, or as an entity using OData. It would show up as an object right there inside of Power BI with all the contents. We can definitely get into that if you want to dig into it on a call. We can kind of do a demo of that specifically.
Okay. The next question related is, can you talk about some of the ways that Hybrid Data Pipeline can help save money when using Salesforce Connect?
Sure. So a couple ways. One is that it lets you access your data where it lives. So you're not having to spend any money to move it to Salesforce or store it in Salesforce. The other thing we do is Salesforce does charge for the Salesforce Connect feature on a per endpoint basis. And we have a feature called data source grouping, which lets you shift everything down one level in the REST API so that you can use a single purchased endpoint, but still have access to multiple data sources behind Hybrid Data Pipeline. So a couple different ways where it will help you to save there.
Okay. A couple more questions. What type of support is included with a subscription?
So we offer with the subscription 24/7, 365 follow the sun support. It's kind of one of our things we're known for at Progress and DataDirect is our level of support, and why we have so many large companies that depend on us for our solutions.
Yeah, I would even say things like tutorials, a lot of documentation online. We're definitely here to help if you need it either during the trial or the licensing period.
Definitely.
Okay. I only have two more questions. So to the audience, if you have any more, please type them in the chat window for the questions, and we'll jump on in for the last two, unless we have any others. Can you talk to me a little bit about licensing?
So for licensing, it's licensed on a per server basis or per instance. So Depends on what your deployment looks like, but like it would be like maybe a 2-node cluster. Each of those servers in the cluster would be licensed on a subscription basis. And then for our OEM customers, we definitely do custom pricing there if you're looking at it for other types of solutions.
Okay. So I have one question, and this is probably related to something, Todd mentioned. Actually, we just got one came in. So why don't I ask that one, and then I'll wrap up with the next one. Does the system support multi-languages like Japanese and Chinese?
So the user interface for hybrid data pipeline does not, but I would expect that we should be able to return data from data sources without any problem. And you could use the management APIs in that regard if you found, or if you needed a way to expose that maybe in your own custom UI or to expose certain aspects of it in a different language. We also do have branding capabilities for the white labeling for the user interface. So depending on what your specific requirements are, we could dig into that a little bit further.
Okay. So this is the marketing question of the day, and this is related to something that Todd said earlier. He's a marketer. He's never downloaded and installed. You made the install look quick. How long does it really take?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do, but for a trial, most people get going within a few hours to a day. I mean, if you're familiar with Docker and you want to do a very basic installation, you might be up and running as quick as an hour. But it's a pretty straightforward installation, as long as you may need a few components, external database or SSL certificate. So once you have all the pieces in place, it goes pretty quickly.
And I do think I need to qualify that a little bit. I haven't used it completely on my own. I had some help from one of Aaron's colleagues, and it went completely smooth. So yeah, even business users like myself can definitely take advantage of hybrid data pipeline.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. So Aaron and Todd, from all of us here at DataDirect, thank you for your time. And we hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you.